All right, so welcome to another episode of the Rediscovery channel, where I myself, Stilgar, and my friend Ivor, we both each week look at a different topic that the other person doesn't know of, potentially, and we try to see, if we can rediscover history together, because history is really important. And that's where we are. And this week, actually, it's a new. We're taking a content that was a topic that was suggested to us by one of our listeners. Thank you very much for that one. And like we said, we are new and we're looking for content. So thank you for recommending this one. And so we've already discussed this, Ivor, but so this week I'll be talking a little bit about the shortest war in history. And we've both done a little bit of reading into it, myself a little bit more, and let's see if we can bring this topic to justice, because it's actually quite interesting. And this war is the the Anglo-Zanzibar War. So Ivor, do you know where where it lies approximately?
I know it's off the coast of East Africa, and right now it's being ruled by some other country. The pictures I saw of it, it looks like a nice kind of vacation resort type of place. But I actually don't know as much about it probably as you do, because you're the one that was taking this topic. So,
all right, okay. Well, so Zanzibar is an island off the coast of East Africa, so you got that one right. And it was originally settlers from Africa that went there and settled on the island. Later on, there were also Persians in the 10th century that moved there. So there was some Persian influence on the local culture. But it became part of the Sultanate of Oman later on. So it became, taken. The Arabs took over the islands pretty much and started their own sultanate there. There were Portuguese there for a little bit as well. But then again, it went back into Arab hands in the year, 1698. And then because the Sultanate of Oman liked the place so much, it actually moved its capital to the island. And declared, but then it was later on declared independent of Oman in 1858. So then it was split from the Sultanate of Oman. And the reason that the Arabs were here was because it was perfect for the slave trade. So there was actually a lot of raids going from the Zanzibar Island. We'll put some pictures on the video that you can look at on BitChute or YouTube. But because of its position, it was perfect for going in on these raids and getting black slaves. And then those were then shipped off to the Arab world and later on to places like North America and South America. So because of this, it was a wealthy region. And the Sultanate actually ruled from the islands. It also ruled over the mainlands or parts of the mainland of what is nowadays Tanzania. But this was a different time that we're talking about right now. So we're talking about this conflict that happened in the year 1896. And do you happen to know, Ivor, how long the war lasted?
I believe it just lasted a couple hours.
No, actually, it was a whole of 38 minutes. So making it the shortest recorded war in history. and the whole war is also tied into Britain and Germany vying for interest in the area. So the Sultanate at one point becomes a protectorate of the Great British Empire, whereas the mainland is taken over. So what is nowadays basically Tanzania was taken over by the Germans, who were kind of late to the colonial game. But this was one of their colonies. I think they also had another colony in Southwest Africa. I know they had Togo, but they were kind of late to the game, and this is where they started a colony, and they were trying to compete, right? And the English said, well, the Sultanate is part of our protectorate, but in return, we want to have kind of the final say in who is the Sultan of Zanzibar. And this is kind of where the conflict arose. So they had this Sultan installed called Hamad. And he was kind of doing listening to what the British wanted to, and basically playing along for the most part. And he was in place there for 3 years. Everything was going quite okay. But then at some point, after just 3 years, he suddenly died, and a lot of people think he was poisoned. After which his 29-year-old nephew, Khalid, moved into the palace. So he has this palace built mostly out of wood. And I'll put some pictures in there for that one as well. And he moved into the palace, and he claimed himself Sultan. Now, there were a couple of reasons that the sultans of Zanzibar, or the people of Zanzibar, mostly the Arabs, were not so happy with the British being a British protectorate, because one of the goals that Britain had was to abolish slavery throughout its empire.
Yeah, I read about that. They they ended slavery in that region, and the previous ruling class wasn't happy about it because that's where a lot of their money came from.
Yeah, so it was coming through both the slave trade as well as owning slaves, because they were growing all sorts of spices on this island. But yeah, so there was this big movement coming out of England itself, and I actually have a nice poem by the English poet William Calper, and I probably didn't pronounce that correctly, but in 1785, when this how do you pronounce it? Abolitionist movement.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, he wrote this during this movement, and he wrote, quote, "We have no slaves at home, then why abroad? Slaves cannot breathe in England. If their lungs receive our air, that moment they are free. They touch our country and their shackles fall. That's noble, and bespeaks a nation proud. And jealous of the blessing, spread it then, and let it circulate through every vein."
Mm.
So yeah, so this was part of this anti-slavery movement, with the Society for Effecting the Abolition of the Slave Trade, which was established in 1787. And mind you, this is 100 years before this war took place, because certain parts of the empire still had slave trade, because it was just a way of life, right? So and actually some of the places that were last to abolish slavery was actually Oman, who abolished slavery in the year, you want to guess?
Uh, I'm guessing it was this century, probably, right? In Saudi Arabia, they still haven't abolished slavery yet.
Well, they have, but then they haven't. Like de facto, they still have it.
They abolished it on paper, but they just kind of winged it.
Yes, on under, and again, that was also under pressure by by the Brits, pretty much. But officially, in Oman, it was abolished in 1970, so
Okay.
quite recent. Anyway, so let's go back to our story, right? So we have Hamad, and then we have his nephew Khalid, and he is in there, right? And he takes over the palace, and he has like a like a couple thousand people on his side, including some slaves as well, some bodyguards. Um, and in total, I think he had about 2,800 men on his side. Um, and then on the other side were the Brits, and they had a couple ships basically in the harbor, and then they also had a ship on the side. So the new self-proclaimed sultan also had a ship, but it was basically a yacht that the former sultan got. It was the HMS Glasgow, and it was based on a British frigate, the Glasgow, and it was built in the UK as a gift, and it also had some guns and machine guns on it, and it was pretty interesting actually. These battleships were kind of like in between, like what you would see. So they were like steam powered for the most part. But then they still had sails on them, and they had some pretty interesting cannons and Gatling guns. So there was pretty. It's like a convergence of two eras in warfare. And we should include some of those pictures because they were some pretty cool looking ships. But yeah,
I
so
think actually, I think the Confederates here in the United States were actually the first people to make a metal warship. And I mentioned that in one of the earlier videos. They raised a ship up from the bottom of the ocean and they plated it in metal. It was like the first metal warship. I'm pretty sure that they were the first. When did this war occurred here? What year was it?
1897.
Oh, then they should have had. I guess so. They didn't have completely. So their ships were not completely covered in metal at this time.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, by the way, it was 1896. Sorry. Anyway.
1896.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds like, huh?
So it was, yeah. So they would have some probably some plating on it, but let's see if we can get some good images. Anyway, it trickled my imagination a little bit. When was War of the Worlds written? Do you happen to know that? Ivor, by any
It was
chance?
written in. I know it was written in the 1800s. I think, or no, it may have been written during the Edwardian period. I'm not sure. Actually.
Okay. All right. Well, when I read that book, that's the kind of like it kind of matches that what I saw in my head reading that. But yeah. So so on the other hand, we had this ambassador called Basil, a British ambassador. And he basically, he said, well, this new guy is in there. He's taken the palace, and he gave him an ultimatum to move out. But then he asked, the Foreign Office, quote, "Are we authorized in the event of all attempts at a peaceful solution proving useless to fire on the palace from the men of war," which was, those gunships they had out there. And he was given the order, or the telegraph came back reading, quote, "You are authorized to adopt whatever measures you may consider necessary and will be supported in your action by Her Majesty's government. Do not, however, attempt to take any action which you are not certain of being able to accomplish successfully." So basically, he was told that, you're free to reign, but I guess, just make sure that you do a good job at it. And yeah, so he went over and he told them to, his messenger went over, and they had another parley, and he told them to lower their flag, right, and raise the British flag.
Mhm.
And then the messenger from Khalid declared that, quote, "We have no intention of hauling down our flag, and we do not believe you would open fire on us." And then the British replied that, quote, "We do not want to open fire, but unless you do as you are told, we shall certainly do so." All right, so so then basically, so Her Majesty's ships, called the Raccoon, the Thrush, and Sparrow, they all opened fire at the palace simultaneously. And the first shots immediately dismounted like one of these 12-pounder cannons that the Arabs had. And then basically they were using high explosive shells, and they were in this wooden castle, right, a wooden palace. And yeah, so it was like, less than 40 minutes of shelling, and over 500 people died on the side of Khalid. They sunk the yachts, so the armored yachts tried to fire as well, but then he got like a return fire and immediately went down. So yeah, so the British ships, they fired around 500 shells, 4,100 machine gun rounds, and 1,000 rifle rounds during the engagement, and they ended up losing how many people? Guess.
I think they didn't lose any, actually, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, you're right. They didn't.
Yeah.
There was one petty officer, whatever that means, who got wounded.
Petty
So,
officer. You say petty officer?
yeah, petty officer. Yeah. What is that? Sorry.
I'm not sure what that is, actually. I've heard that term before, but
Okay. Well, it doesn't sound like it's a high-ranking officer,
probably
right?
like just above the lowest level.
Yeah.
Level guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So 38 minutes later, it was over. They surrendered, and Khalid took off while he still had some of his men and slaves fighting, and he sought refuge in the German consulates, and then made it across to the mainland. And the Germans refused to extradite him because there was no treaty for extradition. But then during the First World War, the Brits were taking over Tanzania, I guess, or what was then the German East African colony.
Mhm.
And they got a hold of him, and they actually sent him to the same island they sent Napoleon to, which was St. Helens in the Atlantic Ocean. But then after serving his time there, he was actually let go, and I think he ended up dying of old age. But the Brits were like highly regarded by the government in London for their action leading up and during the war, because it was fairly quick and not too many died. People died on the side of the Brits, or altogether, right? I mean, of course, 500 people is still, yeah. I mean, for a war, it's not that many. And then it also kind of gave the people in the region a lesson to not mess with the Brits. So kind of consolidated their power there, and I think it was was their protectorate for another 70 years, and they were able to abolish slavery for the most part. And yeah, that's it. And now it's part of Tanzania, so it's an interesting part. Interesting island. I think it's 98% Muslim now.
Oh.
But the mainland Tanzania is I believe is 60% or something Christian, and then 30% Muslim or something like that, and they do have freedom of religion for the most part. So pretty interesting story of the shortest war ever, and actually found it quite interesting to learn a little bit more also about what the Germans were doing there, because I know they were quite late to the game.
I bet the Germans didn't make any effort to stop slavery.
Actually, that was one of the reasons that they kind of started colonizing the area. It's like, or supposed reasons, is that they wanted to stop slavery as well, but they weren't as outspoken about it as the Brits were. But they did feel that they needed a colony, I guess, because so many other European powers had a colony, and I think it was Otto von Bismarck, who deserves. He probably also deserves an episode, but he wasn't too fond of the whole idea of colonizing whole different regions, and that's why it took them longer. And they
Yeah,
more or
I
less
guess
just
it's race mixing.
no, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know what the main reason for. I think they also wanted to have a place mostly for natural resources,
Hmm.
but also to kind of like what the English did with Australia to send their convicts to and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting story. I hope we did it justice. I think there's a lot more to be said about Zanzibar and Tanzania. And I think it's an interesting side of the British Empire. They really try to also modernize these countries by starting schools, universities, and really they also did a lot to try and get these people into the modern world. So yeah.
Yeah, they it's interesting how the English they they thought they knew what was best for everybody. And slavery is something that is not just bad for the slaves, it's also bad for the country, because when you have slavery, there's less incentive to innovate. And usually countries where they have slavery, they never industrialize on their own. Because
Yeah, and
there's
that was part of the reason that some of the people there, the ruling class, were so opposed to it because they also led very comfortable lives, and yeah, they didn't want that to end. So, and it
Yeah,
was, of course,
usually.
it was very profitable as well. And I believe actually that that's I think at some point that Great Britain paid the slave owners off, right? Didn't they? I think they paid quite a huge sum in silver sterling to compensate them for losing their slaves,
We
which
actually had that in the United States a little bit, like all the original colonies, like when this place was ruled by the English, slavery was actually allowed in every colony, and even like New York. And after, the War of Independence, one of the ways that they got rid of slavery in some states is by paying off the slaveholders, like compensating them for letting the people go. Of course, they didn't do that in the South, and I mean that's probably a topic for another time. But yeah, that is one way to do it. Just buy them off, so that there's less resistance. I guess if you're as rich as the English were back then, controlling so much of the world's resources, it wasn't a problem for them to do that.
yeah, I think they took out a loan actually, but to
Oh,
do so. But yeah, yeah. All right, man. Well,
I got one
well,
thing
thanks. Yeah.
that's
All
kind of
right. Go
interesting
ahead.
about
Yeah.
Tanzania. You
Mm-hmm.
know who comes from, man, my voice. You know who comes from Tanzania?
No idea. No.
Rachel Luttrell.
Oh, sorry. I don't even know who that is. It sounds
You know her
familiar.
face if you saw her. She played Taylor in Stargate Atlantis.
Ah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, man, she's
Hey.
from Tanzania.
Yeah, but she has a little bit of an Indian or Persian look to her as well, right? So maybe that's interesting.
She
Okay.
is. Her mother is from one of the native people groups, and her
Okay.
father was a white guy, I think Canadian. So, but yeah, she does like to me when I first saw her, I thought she was like actually Southeast Asian, but turns out she's just half white, half black.
Yeah, because the Persians it mixed with the local population, like I said, so they actually adopted some Persian culture there as well, and they kind of just absolved into the population. And then they also had Indian minorities living there as well. And actually, during this war, I think some of the civilian casualties were Indians because there was this Indian neighborhood where people kind of took advantage of the war going on, and I guess they were store owners or whatever, but they ended up killing 20 of the Indians living there. And there may have been a racial element or a religious element behind it as well, but I didn't get around to looking into that one. But
Yeah,
yeah,
there's always people that complain about Indians coming in and taking the jobs and stuff like that. And
yeah,
it's like, well, um, yeah, I don't know. I'm
they ended up
actually
sending Sikh. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but the Brits ended up sending up more Sikhs to kind of check and keep order in
But yeah, they
place.
used the Sikhs because they had a a long tradition of fighting. And they had Sikh.
Maybe we should do an episode about the Sikhs sometime as well, because I don't know much about them, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different religion. It's neither Hindu nor Muslim, and I don't recall how it got started, but like they're supposed to have beards, and the guys are supposed to have long hair, and they they wear the turbans always. So that's how you tell them, apart from other Indians, is they have their unique style of dress. And of course, the English, they allowed them to maintain that even while serving in the army. And I believe that the Punjabis are a bit larger than average, a bit taller compared with the average for the rest of India. So they make they're kind of a imposing physical appearance. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah, it'd be worth looking at them later. So
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, this was the viewer suggested topic. So thanks so much, viewer. Jonathan actually is the name of the viewer I saw. So thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate it. Any other recommendation, please let us know. Let them come in. Also, if you want to if you want to share, we're not doing this for money, but we do appreciate, of course, if people listen to our stories. It's just fun. Um, yeah. Let's take it from there. Anything
share our
from your
content.
side, Ivor?
No, just I would say, as usual, if you like our content, share it with others and recommend. And I do apologize for the sound of my voice, but yeah, do go ahead and share our video. And if anybody else has a request, drop the request. We didn't get to it right away, but we will get to it eventually. So
That's
I
right.
think that's good. I think that's everything I need to say.
All right, man. All right. Well, thanks.